The night the Mississippi River swallowed the town, no one in Washington wanted to say its name out loud. It was not because the river had never flooded before. It had. It was not because Americans were unfamiliar with disaster. They were not. The silence came from something far more unsettling, something that threatened the carefully curated story of how the United States believed it had been born. Because buried beneath the mud, broken timbers, and human bones was evidence of a civilization that had risen, ruled, and collapsed long before Columbus ever imagined the Atlantic crossing. And for more than a century, the United States tried very hard to forget it. Long before steel bridges spanned the Mississippi, and long before St. Louis called itself the gateway to the West, a different city dominated North America. It had no written alphabet, no kings crowned in gold, and no stone pyramids like those of Egypt. Yet at its peak, it was larger than London, more organized than most European capitals, and more powerful than anything north of Mexico. Its name was Cahokia. In the year 1050, while much of Europe lived in scattered feudal villages, Cahokia exploded into existence almost overnight. Tens of thousands of people converged on the fertile floodplains near present-day Illinois. They built massive earthen pyramids by hand, basket by basket, generation by generation. The largest, Monk's Mound, rose higher than the Great Pyramid of Giza's base and covered more ground than the Roman Colosseum. This was not a tribe, it was an empire. From its core, Cahokia controlled trade routes that stretched from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. Copper from Michigan, shells from Florida, obsidian from the Rocky Mountains, all flowed through this city. Its leaders commanded labor forces of staggering scale. Its priests aligned massive plazas to the movements of the sun and stars with astronomical precision. Yet when French explorers arrived centuries later, Cahokia was already dead. No survivors told its story. No written history explained its fall. And that silence terrified the young United States. In the early 1800s, as America expanded westward, settlers encountered thousands of massive earthen mounds scattered across the Ohio and Mississippi valleys. They were too big, too symmetrical, too mathematically precise to fit the popular image of Native Americans promoted at the time. So America invented a lie. Politicians, scholars, and newspaper editors claimed the mounds were built by a lost race: Phoenicians, Vikings, Israelites, even refugees from Atlantis. Anyone, apparently, except the indigenous people whose land was being seized. The implication was clear and convenient. Native Americans were merely squatters on land once ruled by a superior, vanished civilization. Removing them, therefore, was not conquest, it was restoration. This myth helped justify the Indian Removal Act, the Trail of Tears, and the violent expansion of the United States across the continent. Meanwhile, the truth sat quietly under farmland. By the mid-1800s, plows cut through ancient graves, railroad projects tore apart ceremonial platforms, entire mounds were flattened to make bricks for growing cities. St. Louis alone destroyed over 40 major earthworks, progress literally built on the dead. One amateur archaeologist, Cyrus Thomas, nearly lost his career insisting on the obvious: the mounds were Native American. When his findings were finally published by the Smithsonian in 1894, the conclusion was unavoidable and deeply uncomfortable. America had erased an empire. But eraser did not mean disappearance. In the summer of 1927, the Mississippi flooded with a violence unseen in recorded history. Water broke through levees and surged across the floodplain. Entire towns vanished beneath brown currents. When the waters receded, they exposed things that should not have been there: human remains laid out in ritual positions, ceremonial objects carved with solar symbols, remnants of wooden structures preserved in anaerotic mud. Local newspapers reported the finds briefly, then the story stopped. Because the deeper archaeologists dug, the more dangerous the implications became. Cahokia was not primitive. It had social classes, centralized authority, state religion, urban planning, and mass human sacrifice. At least one mound revealed dozens of young women buried alive alongside an elite male ruler, arranged with terrifying precision. This was not the peaceful, simple society America preferred to imagine. It was powerful, and it had collapsed. By 1350, Cahokia was almost entirely abandoned. No single cause explains it. Climate change triggered floods and droughts, overpopulation strained resources, political instability likely led to internal violence. The very systems that made the city great may have destroyed it. For the United States, still defining itself as a nation destined to last forever, this was an unsettling mirror. A complex American civilization had risen here before, and it had fallen. In the decades that followed, Cahokia was quietly reframed.
Textbooks reduced it to a footnote. Tour brochures emphasized mysterious mounds rather than empire. The uncomfortable parallels, environmental mismanagement, wealth inequality, political fragmentation, were rarely discussed. Yet the land remembers. Satellite imagery now reveals thousands of undiscovered earthworks beneath modern cities. Ground-penetrating radar continues to find mass graves, ceremonial roads, and lost neighborhoods. Each discovery challenges the narrative of American exceptionalism. Because Cahokia forces a question no empire likes to ask. If the most advanced civilization in North America could disappear without a trace, what guarantees that ours will not? And this is only the beginning. In the next chapter, the story turns darker, toward the rituals, the rulers, and the evidence that Cahokia's collapse may not have been peaceful at all.